Curiosity AIs, great novels. The Count of Monte Cristo. Once upon a time, in the bustling port of Marseille, there was a young man named Edmond Dantes. He was only 19 years old but had already risen to the rank of first mate aboard the Pharaon, a ship owned by a wealthy merchant named Moreau. Edmond was admired by his crew and trusted by his employer. He was on the verge of being named captain, an honor that would change his life forever. But more than his career, Edmond's heart was filled with love for Mercedes, a beautiful young woman who lived in the same village. They were deeply in love, and Edmond dreamed of nothing more than marrying her and living a peaceful life by her side. The world seemed to be smiling upon Edmond. His future was bright, and everything he desired was within his reach. But as is often the case, fortune can be fragile. What Edmond did not realize was that his success and happiness had sparked envy in the hearts of others. Danglars, the ship's purser, was filled with resentment. He wanted to be captain himself and could not stand that Edmond had achieved it at such a young age. Fernand, a fisherman and childhood friend, secretly loved Mercedes and was consumed with jealousy, unable to bear the thought of her marrying Edmond. Villefort, a public prosecutor, feared that a letter Edmond unknowingly carried would expose a dangerous political secret that could ruin his career. Together, these men conspired to destroy Edmond's life. They plotted in secret, and on the very day Edmond was to be promoted to captain, he was arrested. Edmond was accused of treason, of being a Bonapartist agent who conspired to bring back Napoleon from his exile. The accusations were false, but the evidence against him, carefully planted by his enemies, was damning. Without understanding what was happening, Edmond was taken away from his home, from his family, and from Mercedes, who waited anxiously for him, unaware of the storm that had struck. Edmond pleaded his innocence, but his words fell on deaf ears. Villefort, the prosecutor handling his case, saw an opportunity to advance his own ambitions and suppress the truth. In a cruel twist of fate, Edmond was condemned without trial and sent to the Château d'If, a remote fortress prison where the worst criminals were kept. There, on a lonely island surrounded by the sea, Edmond was thrown into a cold, damp cell. It was a place where men were sent to be forgotten. In the beginning, Edmond clung to hope. He believed that someone would come to his rescue, that his innocence would be proven, and that he would soon be reunited with Mercedes. He imagined her waiting for him, her heart breaking as the days turned into weeks. But as time passed, hope began to wither. The days in his cell became endless, blending together into an endless night. Years passed, and the vibrant, hopeful young man who had once dreamed of the future became a shadow of himself, consumed by despair and confusion. How could the world be so cruel? Why had he been betrayed? Who had done this to him? Just as Edmond teetered on the brink of madness, a glimmer of hope appeared. In the cell next to his was an old man, Abbé Faria, a fellow prisoner who had been held captive for years. Faria was a scholar, a brilliant man who had been imprisoned for his political views. Over time, the two prisoners found a way to communicate, and eventually, they dug a tunnel that allowed them to meet in secret. Abbé Faria became Edmond's mentor, teaching him everything he knew: history, languages, science, philosophy. The years that Edmond had spent in isolation, filled with despair, were now filled with learning and knowledge. Through Faria, Edmond discovered a world far beyond the walls of his prison. But the Abbé offered more than just wisdom. He confided in Edmond about a treasure hidden on the island of Monte Cristo, a vast fortune that could change the life of whoever found it. At first, Edmond did not believe in such a treasure, but as the years passed, and Faria's knowledge and friendship restored some of Edmond's lost hope, the idea of the treasure began to take root in his mind. Perhaps, if he could escape, the treasure could give him the power to right the wrongs done to him. Faria, however, grew ill. After suffering several seizures, he died in Edmond's arms. The loss of his only friend was a devastating blow, but it also presented Edmond with an opportunity. Using the knowledge Faria had passed on to him, Edmund devised a daring escape. He swapped places with Faria's lifeless body, placing himself in the burial sack meant for the old man. That night, Edmund was carried out of the prison, believed to be dead, and thrown into the sea. But Edmund was not dead. He broke free from the sack and swam through the cold waters to safety. For the first time in 14 years, he was free. But the man who emerged from the sea was not the same young sailor who had been imprisoned all those years ago. The hope and innocence he once carried had been replaced by bitterness and a burning desire for revenge. With the memory of Faria's teachings and the promise of the treasure, Edmund set out for the island of Monte Cristo. After weeks of searching, Edmund found the hidden treasure, just as Faria had described. It was a fortune beyond anything he could have imagined, gold, jewels, and riches that would make him one of the wealthiest men in the world. But Edmund's heart was no longer driven by dreams of happiness or love. His sole focus now was revenge. He would make those who had betrayed him pay for what they had done. With his newfound wealth, Edmund crafted a new identity, the Count of Monte Cristo. He returned to Paris, a city that had long forgotten the name Edmond Dantes. But as the Count, he quickly gained influence in the highest circles of society. No one recognized him as the young sailor they had wronged so many years ago, and Edmund used this to his advantage. Slowly, methodically, he began to weave his web of revenge. First, he targeted Danglars, the man who had coveted his position as captain. Now a wealthy banker, Danglars fell prey to Edmund's financial manipulations, losing everything and ending up in disgrace. Fernand, now married to Mercedes and a celebrated war hero, was exposed as a traitor. His fall from grace was devastating, and Mercedes, now realizing the truth of who the Count was left heartbroken. Villefort, the prosecutor who had condemned Edmund, was driven to madness as Edmund uncovered the dark secrets of his past, leaving his family and reputation in ruins. But as Edmund's enemies fell, one by one, he began to feel the weight of his actions. His heart, once consumed by hatred, now felt the burden of the lives he had destroyed. Though he had sought justice, the path of revenge had cost him dearly. Innocent people, like Mercedes and her son, had suffered because of his vengeance. Edmund began to question whether he had truly achieved the peace he longed for. In the end, Edmund stood at a crossroads. He had fulfilled his quest for vengeance, but his soul remained restless. The Count of Monte Cristo, the persona he had created to exact his revenge, no longer served him. He realized that in seeking justice, he had lost a part of himself. And so, Edmund made a choice, to forgive and seek redemption. He made amends where he could, helping those who had been hurt by his actions, and forgiving those who sought forgiveness. Leaving behind the identity of the Count of Monte Cristo, Edmund sailed away, seeking a new life, free from the chains of the past. He ventured into an uncertain future, searching not for wealth or power, but for peace, love, and perhaps, redemption. For in the end, it was not the treasure of Monte Cristo that set him free, it was the forgiveness he found in his heart. And so ends the tale of Edmond Dantes, a man who was once wronged, who sought revenge, but who learned that true freedom comes not from vengeance or wealth, but from the ability to forgive and find peace within oneself.